glad you all found it. And welcome. We're just going to get started. It's great we've got the round table format because we really hope that everybody will have loads of questions and we can get into much more of an interactive discussion. Forgive me if I'm peering around the corner at some of you. I just wanted briefly to introduce the panellists. We've got three great panellists today and a very multinational panel, I have to say. Spanish, French and German. So we're going to mix up the languages, but mostly in English. If you need French or English translation, it's on channel 3. So let me first introduce Inés Ayala Senda, who is an MEP for the Social and Democrat group here in the Parliament, our Spanish member of the panel, and who was telling me that she doesn't just have the political view, but also the business view, of course, because here in Brussels she faces many business representatives, let's say, who come and lobby her. So sitting next to her over here in the middle, we have Elizabeth Keelan. Elizabeth's German, and she is at King's in London, and has recently actually published last week in Davos, you may have seen it, some quite interesting research which we hope she will say more about, and also is the recent author of a book called Rising Stars, which you should look out for. And one of the things that Elizabeth's book has in common with Muriel here is the subject of millennium women, and we think that that could be something of an interesting conversation given some of the elements we heard in the first debate. So here on my left I have Muriel Saint-Sever, who is French, although she's a sort of global citizen, I think, given her responsibilities as Group Diversity Officer for Mazars. So very interesting mix of business, academia, politics. We're just going to dive right in, and we thought maybe the first topic for our discussion, which is really all about women's leadership, bringing forward women leaders in the political world and in the business world, and are there things in common, are they different, are there things that can be learnt between the two, and how do you bring forward these women of influence in those two spheres? Maybe the first way to kick off is just to ask the panellists, what are the challenges that face women coming through into leadership positions, and what are the challenges for the organisations to help foster women in leadership? So maybe I'll start with Muriel. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. I'm not going to explain why it is necessary to empower more women, because I think we all share this, but how to do it. Mazars is an international organization based in 72 countries, and I started to put on the top of the agenda gender equality when I discovered that amongst our 780 partners all over the world, there were only 9% of female partners. And very quickly, we decided that our CEO will be involved in it, and we started to work on this, choosing a strategy of influence, because we feel that having offices in 72 countries, it's not only a business issue to empower women, but it's also a cultural issue, and you have to understand the culture of the country you're working with. So we decided to choose a strategy of influence to influence our staff first, our clients we're working with, and they are having the same issues, and the public. It's why we decided to publish a book about women, a survey on Generation Y, and a survey last year on men. For me, today, it's a global social change. It's not only a business issue for some companies in a few countries. And this global change can be improved, can be done only with businesses. Obviously, we need to work with politics if we want to change mentality, legal requirement, but also cultural mindset. And what we discovered at Mazars, what I think is important, is that when most of the time our CEOs are men, when they think they understand the women wishes, they immediately think, okay, men and women are equal, similar, and the only difference is motherhood. So we will give maternity leave, we will give flexibility for these children issues. And I really feel it is part of the issue, of course, but it is not the only one. What I feel today is that the women wishes have changed, and they have similar wishes of the Generation Y, men and women all together. We conducted a survey amongst men and women from 19 years old to 30 years old in 75 countries. And we discovered that what they put on the top of what is important is work-life balance, to live in the best way his life, and to be financially independent. While their parents put on the top to be financially independent, to spend time with family, which is not the same than to live his life it's fully, and to be happy in life. So the wishes are fully different. And the wishes of this generation are similar of the women's wishes. So it's why for me it's a global social change. The second survey we conducted were about men, to understand how they feel in this world in which women are getting more and more power. Because you say that I'm a city traveler, but it's true that I realize that in many countries, even if women are still discriminated because of the sex, they are getting more and more powerful. In Pakistan, 70% of the students are women. In China, a huge number of women are becoming a number of consumers, and a number of women are opening companies. So we are going to change the world. What about the men in this world? And what is important is that they have changed their views on us. Of course, it is our revolution. So they feel now that we have modified our expectation for personal life and for professional life. So they know that, and they are sure that it is different now. When you ask the men, how do they see the women? They see us powerful, responsive, ambitious, very ambitious and very powerful. But when they see themselves, they still see them powerful, responsive, virile, protective. That means that they have changed their views on us, but not their views on them. And that's the thing we should work on in companies. But what I feel, because I'm working in a private company, that there is a very, stop me if I am wrong, but I believe there is a very important difference between women in business and women in politics. I feel that women in business are elected, and they have to achieve an issue and to solve a problem. And the more powerful they will be, the more aggressive they will be. If they achieve what they have to do, everybody will be happy. If you do that in a business, it will be terrible, because you are paid by the company. And if you show that you are too more aggressive, you will not get the next level of the ladder, because most of the men will look at you as an aggressive woman and will not give you any support. So the behavior of women in politics and in business for me are very different, and we need to learn together from each other.
Maybe that's a great, maybe that's a great place to bring in Inez, and Inez, get your view of the political world and respond a little there to some of the comments from Muriel. Thanks, Muriel.
Well, first of all, welcome to our house, to your house, because it's the European Parliament. And just to make you feel some feel of our diversity, I will go on my speech in French. that you need your earphones, which are just nearby. Okay? Voilà.
Okay.
Je vais parler en français. Ça va? Oh, merci. Oh, mais c'est magnifique, alors on aurait pu parler du... Ok, merci beaucoup. Voilà. Je suis espagnol, mais ma deuxième langue c'est français, pour cela que pour vous parler, je préfère si vous me permettez. Alors, justement, je voulais un petit peu refléter un peu ce qui est le chemin, de mon point de vue, a été fait par la politique en ce qui est l'égalité des femmes. C'était par le vote qu'on a commencé la lutte, comment dire, formelle pour l'égalité hommes-femmes. Et on doit dire que c'est par la politique, comment dire, le débat au sein des partis et des institutions politiques, qu'on a réussi à mettre en œuvre ce que nous appelons les actions positives. Ça veut dire des lois, des normes, que maintenant, parfois, et je vois ici des jeunes, que parfois on dirait qu'ils sont, comment dire, déjà adoptés pour toujours. Je voudrais vous dire que ce n'est pas le cas, qu'il faut toujours être, et notamment pour ce qui est les égalités, les libertés et les droits des femmes, il faut toujours être vigilant. Et on a commencé alors par la lutte interne. Dire, le vote était le premier élément pour pouvoir s'affirmer comme sujet politique, et à partir de ce moment, lutte pour les éléments des droits, des changements des lois, etc. Je dois dire aussi que dans le cadre de l'État, on trouve toujours, et on a trouvé toujours, que la capacité d'avancer, dès qu'on avait la capacité de se... Par exemple, je parle des concours pour les fonctionnaires, etc. Dès qu'on avait une vraie égalité des chances, ça veut dire sans se positionner, même comme individu, devant les tribunaux, on a vraiment réussi, pas seulement à être à 50%, mais, comme vous l'avez dit, même au-delà. En Espagne aussi, les femmes universitaires sont plus que les hommes universitaires. C'est quelque chose qui est de plus en plus courant à niveau de cette... Autre chose, c'est quand on entre dans les secteurs technologiques, les ingénieries, encore, il y a une grande différence et c'est encore là qu'il faut vraiment faire un effort. Mais normalement, là, on a réussi. Dès qu'il y avait cette capacité, possibilité de se présenter comme un numéro en disant, sans s'identifier comme individu homme ou femme, on a réussi et on a même allé au-delà. En Espagne, par exemple, à niveau de tout ce qui est les ministères légaux, les juges et tout ça, on est même dépassé presque 70% des femmes fiscales, etc. Ça veut dire vraiment, dès qu'il y a la possibilité d'être pas jugé, par ainsi dire, par les gens, voilà, hommes et femmes, alors on est vraiment capable de le faire. Dans les business, bon, là, je vois toujours qu'il y a deux éléments. Moi, je travaille beaucoup avec les transports, qui n'est pas un secteur trop féminin, mais que finalement, nous sommes aussi capables d'y entrer, et on voit le même. Ça veut dire, dans ce qui était les entreprises publiques, normalement, au transport, il y avait toujours des femmes qui étaient capables, ça veut dire qui ont fait vraiment ce boulot. Dès qu'on entre dans la partie privée, on commence à trouver des autres problèmes. Du coup, on doit vraiment foncer ou avancer dans des lois et des normes pour faire que tous les pas en avant ne soient pas en arrière. Donc là, dans les entreprises, je trouve qu'il y a deux éléments de lecture. Une, c'est les grandes entreprises, les grandes corporations, où on commence à faire le chemin, mais encore trop petit à petit. C'est pour cela que les normes et les lois, pour avoir une action positive, comme celle que la commissaire Viviane Reding nous proposait, c'est énormément important. Parce que, encore, comme vous disiez, il y a différents groupes, et les hommes nous voient encore comme, dans certains secteurs, comme une menace, parce que de plus en plus, nous sommes capables, dès qu'on est là, vraiment à réussir et même à, comment dire, pacifier le terrain. Du coup, on devient plus productif, on devient, comment dire, on prend ensemble tout l'entourage, on a un cadre plus ample, on compte avec tout le monde, du haut en bas et de bas en haut. C'est-à-dire qu'on a, par culture, je ne dis pas, moi, je suis totalement convaincu que vraiment, il y a deux cultures et c'est très important. C'est pour ça que je suis optimiste, parce que la culture, on peut changer. C'est-à-dire on peut vraiment travailler pour le changement. Et là, il y a, comment dire, dans les grandes corporations, et encore plus dans le corps de notre actuelle société, où il y a l'économique, c'est vraiment pris la grande partie, on trouve vraiment qu'il y a des endroits où sont encore fermés. Par exemple, je venais justement, parce que j'étais très impressionné, des cas maintenant des femmes, il y avait quelques Espagnols, mais aussi de tous les pays, que dans la city ou dans le street, ils sont capables, comment dire, de commencer à dénoncer le grand sexisme et vraiment la discrimination faramineuse qu'il y a encore dans ces cœurs de notre société qu'il faudrait vraiment arriver à ouvrir. Il y a eu des arrêts actuels où on voit des femmes très jeunes, hein, de 28 à 42 ans, qui ont dénoncé et dont on voit encore, et ça c'est ce qui me frappe énormément, que malgré qu'ils ont un arrêt en faveur, contre le banque ou la société broker, etc., dont leurs compagnons, vraiment, c'était vraiment une guerre à l'intérieur, leur carrière est tranchée. Ça veut dire, ils savent pour le moment, ce sont les pionnières. C'est pour ça que je trouve que c'est très important de pouvoir, dans des forums comme celui-là, faire une action positive pour les accompagner. Parce que je trouve que là, parfois, ils sont aussi très seuls. Hein, Alors, je trouve que là, d'autre part, quand il y a la crise, quand il y a les États ou les pays en sous-développement, dans la guerre, on appelle toujours les femmes, via les microcrédits, via l'entrepreneuriat de type social, via l'économie dans son expression la plus petite mais la plus courageuse, on les appelle justement à gérer cette économie en crise. Et on le voit de plus en plus chez nous. Justement, les entrepreneurs sont plus femmes que hommes, malgré que la crise a frappé plus d'hommes que les femmes pour le moment. Dans les services publics et autres, c'est différent. Hein. Mais là, on a justement, dans l'économie, dans la partie, comment dire, entreprise, on voit toujours ces deux éléments. Dans les grands, il y a encore des remparts énormes qu'il faut ouvrir, qu'il faut vraiment, et accompagner ces femmes qui sont les pionnières dans des situations énormément difficiles, où leurs carrières sont vraiment mises très jeunes en plus. Et d'autre part, ces autres femmes qui sont l'économie, quand il y a la crise, quand il y a le désarroi, justement, qui sont capables de rétisser encore à nouveau l'économie. Donc je trouve que c'est là où nous sommes vraiment dans un débat. Moi, je suis toujours, sinon je ne serais pas femme politique, optimiste, et j'ai commencé dans la carrière politique justement à travers le mouvement en faveur des droits des femmes. Parce que je trouve que c'est là où il y a les germes du meilleur pour la politique et aussi pour l'économie.
Et je crois que l'optimisme, c'est un bon moment d'entendre Elizabeth, and with the positive thing, get you to maybe just respond a little bit also to what the two other panelists have said and come in with some of the findings. I think also, wasn't it an interesting point to hear that in a way women have been successful by being anonymous, by being a number? I thought that was just an interesting thing. I never thought of that.
But not being identified as women. I think this is the women against men. I think that's
Elizabeth,
you're right. This is interesting.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's difficult to add anything new to that debate. I mean, just to summarize where we are, politics and business, quite different fields. However, they do share something in common, and that's what I've summarized in my research as the 50-30-10 rule. You know, you start out having, more women around, and then somehow the more senior the position becomes, the less and less you have. And there are certain mechanisms to try to avoid that, and we have heard a lot about the quota and how that can challenge inequality and so on. But what my research is on is much more the pipeline, as it is called, in the business world, the younger women and how they move through their experiences in the workplace. Because what we need to keep in mind is that the young women who are like 20 to 30, 35 today have grown up in a time where gender is quite different to before. Before, you really had to struggle. It was what we call gender discrimination 1.0, the traditional form, and it hasn't gone away, right? There's still a lot of very traditional gender discrimination happening, but actually nowadays it's much more subtle and much more difficult to grasp. So where the law is not as effective to deal with those things, and that's why the organizations do unconscious bias awareness training and so on and so forth. So my research was about finding, kind of an answer to the question, how can we make the pipeline truly sustainable? Not in the sense as, yes, we kind of modify it right at the top, so certain mechanisms, but also we need to ensure that the women today who are young and enter politics or the workplace, and what can we do to support them? And the problem you face with this generation is that they tell you, oh, we don't need this type of stuff anymore, right? That is not relevant for us. I've been teaching, students at King's College London for a number of years now, and there's kind of this sentiment that, gender inequality is so yesterday, our mothers and grandmothers had to, suffer from it, but today that no longer happens. And that has incredibly positive effect. If you look at young women today, we see that the confidence levels are the same amongst men and women, right? So for the young generations, traditional idea that confidence of women is lower no longer holds true. Additionally, research finds that young women want to lead. They have the same level of leadership aspirations as their male peers. So again, that's also different. So before we could always get away with, women just don't want to lead, and they just don't want to be in those positions. So while we have this golden opportunity to make true sustainable changes happen in any kind of situations, at the same time we still see that women do question themselves more, particularly when things go not so well. And the problem and danger with that is as you make experiences that might be described as gender discrimination or some form of gender inequality, you're no longer able to recognize this, and instead you think, oh, it's just me. I'm not good enough. I'm not, adaptable enough. I just can't succeed because of me as an individual, rather than looking at it from a systemic level and saying, well, even though gender inequality has changed, it still hasn't gone away. And I think that is where we need to start thinking about how we can motivate those young women to realize those challenges that they're going to confront. And obviously the traditional idea of role models and mentors and sponsors, they do have a role to play in that. But what you very often find is that young women are more hesitant to identify with more senior women. When I did my research, I was surprised by how many negative emotions these younger women had towards older women. The queen bee idea that older women not support younger women and things like that. So what I encourage in my work the younger women to do is to actually say, well, don't look for the perfect role model who's done everything like you wanted to do, but actually to find composite role models. As we know, normally role models are constructed anyway. So pick elements from people that you admire and integrate that into your own self-concept. But there's only so much you can do to really support young women if the organizations in which they enter and which they want to succeed don't change. Right? And for now we see that we have the first generation of CEOs of private sector companies who are asked to make changes in regards to gender equality. Right? So they suddenly have to lead on those issues, which traditionally were not in the remit of the CEO. You would have a diversity and inclusion person maybe who was in charge, but increasingly we see that CEOs do take leadership, and that is the second report that Julia mentioned that just came out last week, which explores how CEOs can actually lead the way and how can they support changing their organizations. And we know that CEOs are incredibly important. What they say and do has a role modeling function within the organization. And what we found in this research is that very often the CEOs, very global sample, were inclined to talk about the business case. Why it is important from a business perspective to have more women. They often came out with very traditional views on why they wanted more women, which are, by the way, highly stereotypical too. And then they would talk a bit about the social imperative for having more women, but what we found was only present in very few instances was their personal motivation for making change happen. But looking at what really made a difference are those personal narratives that the CEOs brought forward. Why are they motivated to make change happen? And that can be quite different from having daughters to having read a specific book that motivated them to take action. But if they then adopt a much more emotional and personal response, that potentially can help organizations to facilitate this important cultural change where we can no longer just ask women to adapt to systems and structures that were designed not with them in mind, but where we actually start to break that up and we take the people who shape those organizations into responsibility.